We'll proceed now to the third speaker, David Stewart Patterson.
For the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, within the Canadian Council, Mr. Stewart Patterson has responsibility for all issues addressed by the Council's National Policy Committee. Among other positions, Mr. Patterson was parliamentary correspondent for the Globe and Mail reports on business, editor-in-chief of the Robinson Blackboard newspaper chain in Newfoundland and Labrador, and business editor. He's also past president of the Canadian Association of Journalists and a director of the Canadian Journalism Foundation. Mr. Patterson.
Je suis très heureux d'être avec vous ce matin.
I'm very happy to be with you this morning, but I must state off the bat that I was born in Montreal and that I grew up in a neighborhood and a suburb that was very Anglophone. I remember the intense debates relating to language. I heard the anger expressed by the Saint Jean-Baptiste Society during demonstrations. I heard the comments relating to speaking white. It was a debate that was extremely violent that led to bombs and the death of Pierre Laporte. That being said,
in our society, that's part of who we are. My great-great-grandfather was Lord Elgin, the Governor General in 1849, who established a fundamental principle of our democracy, the principle of responsible government, the principle that the elected representatives of Canadians should rule, should make decisions about what was important to us. And the first test of that was a bill fundamentally about divisions on language. The Rebellion Losses Act triggered riots in Montreal, caused the Parliament buildings in Montreal to be burned to the ground, along with the archives. And it caused my great-great-grandfather to be chased out of town with assorted missiles, most of which had long since rotted, but two of which were preserved. And those stones, which were thrown at my ancestor and landed in his carriage as he headed home where his wife was about to give birth, have been preserved and are now have just been returned to Canada, along with all the other artifacts associated with his time as Governor General, including his authority to negotiate the first Canada-U.S. free trade agreement. But I think, with reference to Mel's paper, I'm sorry that Daniel Caron is not with us, because what's being sent to Canada and what we just got the export permission for this summer includes a donation of all of the Governor General's papers, which are being returned to Canada because the British archives, the current Earl felt, would not look after them as well as the Canadian library and archive system. There's a great respect for the way we preserve our memories and our culture. Anyway, I digress. Nous avons partagé beaucoup d'expériences.
We have shared many experiences together as a country and as a bilingual society. This morning we are celebrating 40 years of success, but I think we not only must celebrate the successes of the past, but also life after 40. We have to turn ourselves towards the future. And so I'm very happy that we're talking this morning about the role of bilingualism in the context of globalization and in the context of Canada's economic future and global markets.
Our discussion about bilingualism in Canada in the past has been inward-looking. We've talked about its role in forging our identity and forging our society, and I think we should be proud of what we've done. But I see bilingualism primarily as a platform for looking outward, for making the most of the opportunities being created by an increasingly multicultural and multilingual world. So I think bilingualism for individuals, for individual Canadians, is a stepping stone towards global citizenship. And I think for our country, as Mel Cap has suggested, it's also an important element in our economic competitiveness. In both cases, I'm suggesting that bilingualism matters not just for its inherent benefits, but because of the role it plays in fostering a multicultural and multilingual society. Reality is that Canada always has been a trading nation, and international business is no longer the preserve of the large companies that are represented in my membership. Almost every business in this country, large and small, has some international dimension to it. Companies sell to customers abroad. They buy from suppliers abroad. They invest in operations in other countries. They seek investors from other countries. They recruit employees in Canada to work in other countries. They recruit employees from other countries to work here. Now, as always, of course, Canada's commercial relationships are dominated by our neighbor to the south. And granted that Spanish is growing in importance as a second language in that country and large parts of that country, one language, English, is sufficient to do business just about anywhere in that market. And in that context, I think it's important to recognize the current economic situation and how that's reinforced the danger for Canada in relying too heavily on any one market, no matter how big and how convenient it may be. Post 9/11 security issues already were slowing traffic, increasing costs before this recession hit. Now the slowing demand for our goods in the United States is being compounded by increased protectionism, by American clauses in their stimulus legislation, and the huge deficits that the U.S. government is racking up. $180 billion deficit in the month of July is guaranteeing a future for Americans that we experienced with great pain in the 1990s. A future of rising interest rates and a falling currency. Now, we're going to have to do our best to deal with those particular challenges because the United States is always going to be important to us economically. But that's why we as a business organization have been working very hard to help Canada diversify its economic links. We've taken CEO missions to China and to India. With India, we've gone further. We actually worked with our counterparts in the Confederation of Indian Industry to craft a proposal for a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, and that discussion paper that we worked on is now being used as the basis for negotiations that we hope are going to get underway soon. We did similar things with our counterparts in Europe, and the negotiations between Canada and the European Union got underway this spring. And what I want to emphasize here is that negotiations between countries are no longer primarily about customs duties. You know, tariffs have fallen generally around the world, and getting rid of tariffs is about the easiest thing to talk about when countries are negotiating economic agreements. And I think what's most important are the issues involving investment and those involving people. And it's no coincidence that Quebec Premier Jean Charest, when he was championing the idea of a Canada-European Union agreement, was emphasizing the potential for greater labor mobility between Canada and European countries. And that reflects the fact that across the industrialized world, our populations are aging. To maintain growth, we need to attract people from other countries, and ideally, more people with valuable skills. And as we seek to diversify our commercial links around the world, those language skills are especially valuable. Now, in this context, Canada's linguistic and cultural diversity, rather than its duality, I think is the critical competitive advantage. Renowned American academic Richard Florida, now living in Toronto, has made important observations about the links between creative and dynamic communities and wealth creation. And in particular, what he's noted is that a high proportion of immigrants in a community is an important sign of its dynamism. But more important than the number of immigrants, the proportion of the population, is the diversity of the immigrant community. In other words, what matters most is not having lots of people from somewhere else, but many people from many different places. To give you an example of this, happened a decade ago now. IBM was looking to consolidate its computer technical support operations for all of North America in a single location. 1,500 computer science type jobs. There were a lot of cities across North America that had enough of the right people, but Toronto got the nod because it not only had all the right people at the right price, it had people who could do the job in 23 languages. That was a deciding factor. So language skills matter to investment as well as to trade. Language is a tool that forges relationships. And the economic impact of personal relationships and networks can sometimes be felt in very subtle ways. Again, I ran across an example of this in the late 1990s. A French-based company, Air Liquide, was embarking on 2 major expansions in Canada in the same year, in 1999. $85 million plant expansion in Hamilton and a new $150 million plant in Edmonton. Now, they were both being carried out by the same division of the company, French company. The division was based in Texas. The executive in charge of both of them was a Canadian, based in Texas. But the project managers came from two different places. The Hamilton project was managed by a team from France. The Edmonton project was managed by a team from Houston. And when the company did a post-project analysis, it found that the Hamilton plant had twice as much European content as American content. And the Edmonton plant, run by the Americans, had twice as much American content as European. So, French company, American division, Canadian executive in charge. What mattered most to the economic decisions was the personal networks of the folks on the ground, making the decisions at the plant level. So, who you know, who you relate to, who you trust, matters in terms of economic decision making. So as Canadians think about our economic future, about how we plan to prosper in the global economy, we should understand the role that our bilingual heritage has to play, has played, and must continue to play in shaping our competitive advantage. We should be proud of what we've achieved, and we should make the most of it. And in saying that, I guess I want to conclude by saying, through our experience in dealing with some of the contentious divides between English and French, we have learned very important skills. We've learned the hard way and early how to bridge divides of language and culture. And looking forward, I simply want to suggest that we need to be conscious that bilingualism is a beginning and not an end. Thanks.